Welcome everybody to Learn With Lowell. Today we're joined with BA Millenaar. He's the founder of NLC Health Venture Builder and has the personal aim of advancing health tech and health overall across the globe, not just in the EU or the United States, which I think is going to be our focus for today. And he has 20 years of experience in business development and growth strategies. BA, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. And we were just talking off the record, and we were like comparing the EU to the US, and we're like, what are the differences? And we were having like a bit of a discussion on whether it's grit, it's the drive, or the characteristics that separate Americans from the Europeans. And so for anyone like listening in, like love to hear your comments on what do you think it is. I think we were like, it was close to grit being the winner, but it does seem like it's a multivariable thing that separates the Europeans from the Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not an expert on intercultural differences, but grit definitely was very important. What we just discussed. And another thing is that you celebrate winners. You have the drive to create great stuff, and you are celebrated for it if you succeed. I think in Europe it's more level playing field. They're all the differences are less expressed in Europe, I think, and also less appreciated. That's important.
Are there things? So you talk to people all over the world. You mentioned off there, like even like Middle East, China, like not China, but that was something right up that you were looking into. But what is something that the EU is doing right that you think the US should be noticing more? Like as an American, are there strategies that the EU is employing that's like, oh, that's really smart. I don't know why the Americans aren't doing it. It's like, is there like we can say like, oh, the Americans are really great at grit, investing money like almost blindishly into things. But so there has to be some level of the Europeans doing something right. So what do they get right?
As I said, I'm not an expert, so this is quite a tricky question because there are rather shallow opinions I would have. So I really, really envy the entrepreneurial drive of the Americans.
At any point in this conversation, if you find value in it, please subscribe. It is hugely beneficial, and it tells Google and everyone out there that this is content worth watching. Thank you for everyone thus far who has commented, liked, subscribed, and told their friends.
What I like in Europe is that the differences are less bigger, particularly in Northwestern Europe, which is wealthy. So sometimes I'm surprised in the States that the difference between poor and rich are so enormous. But again, that's also the success of the States. You're celebrated to be a winner, right? It has its advantages as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know one of the big topics we wanted to get in today is just like the innovation differences between the US and the EU. And so from a cursory thing, I've had a lot of people on from, those different groupings. The US, in terms of innovation, we just really throw money at the problem. That's A. And then B, we have like that Statue of Liberty effect of like, hey, if you're really smart or, you can come to America, right? And so if you have the money and you have like the best talent, brain draining from other regions to here, that seems like to be a pretty good catalyst, like set up for innovation to like explode from there. But as someone who's like looking at just like innovation between the two, like what are you noticing as trends?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is what you said, because if you look at the global IP production, then Europe is on par with the United States. And I think one of the root causes for that is that Europe is very fragmented, and we have different cultures or different countries, different languages, different research institutes. So the total production on innovation is on par. And if you take a deeper dive in the health tech big corporates and you look at their innovation pipeline, it's more dominated by European tech than it is by American tech. But there is a difference. So the advantage of Europe is the fact that it is very fragmented and multicultural. And that helps with innovation, right? We just have more opportunities to innovate. But the disadvantage is the fragmentation as well. So if I look at our ventures, if they want to become successful, the first market they look into is the United States. It's a single market. From your perspective, perhaps you look at per state, but compared to Europe, it's a single market. So innovations from Europe, they go to the United States because you can scale much faster because of the market. And because of the market and the risk appetite, there's much more capital. Having said that, I'm not sure if there's more capital in the United States than there is in Europe, but there's more innovation capital. And that's massive. If you look at the private equity houses and the venture capitalists, it's dominated by the Americans.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would have thought, given America's tenacity for failure, that it would result in like more things coming out the pipeline. But I have heard that there is that difference in terms of like, I think like the Sacklers, when it came to the opioids, they wanted to get Germany to okay it because the Germans had such a standard that it was like this thing that would get them into the Middle East and other places because it was just like, oh, if the Germans trust them, then it's good elsewhere. And that's kind of the folly of a little bit of the Americans, that we allowed a drug to just destroy the Rust Belt in that way. So like, it's like there's like that win, like the upside downside of like Americans trying things in that way. But I would assume that because of that, there would have been more IP here. But I guess so. It's really interesting that it's more balanced than I originally would have thought. I recently was talking to someone who does agricultural law, and they said that the EU is an opportunity because if you can reach the standards for the EU structure, like as an American, that's all I think of it as, like the meta thing, that you can get into all those different markets and then sell your products all over the place in there. It sounds like there's not like a, I guess, as standard of regulation when it comes to the health tech scene as like the fact that like people would want Germany over this one to like approve their thing versus America, which is kind of loose when it comes to regulation, which is just like a parallel I've seen in like agriculture. I don't know how it is for health tech.
I think that FDA is quite strict for regulations, and in Europe it is quite strict as well. But the market is just fragmented. So Italy works completely different than the UK, and that works again differently than Sweden. So the difference within Europe are quite big. But to get approval, it's all standardized by one.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What is the risk appetite of the Americans is just so much bigger. If I compare to the Netherlands, we are small. I'm from the Netherlands, Amsterdam. We're a very small country, only 17 million people. From north to south is 300 kilometers, 200 miles. It's 100 miles from east to west, so it's very small. We've got 2,000 billion in pension funds. It's massive. So all our pensions are looked after. No one has to live in poverty. With a big pot of money, it's massive. But they don't invest in innovation. They don't put any money to venture capitalists. And I think that's different with endowments and pension fund, like the Texas teachers or the Ontario nurses or you name it. They're very capital rich, but they invest in VCs and they support innovation. And that's the culture, because you want to move on, you want to live the dream and push society forward, also with money.
Yeah. So what would be like a balanced approach of this institutional investors, instead of investing in how they normally are with the pension funds? What would be like a balanced approach? Because I think their goal essentially is, and I think the benefit there is, in America there have been many funds that have tried reaching for the moon a little bit too much, and then they like wiped out their returns because of the risky investments. And then like the people who are about to retire have like no money there, like it's like a tenth of what it should be. Yeah. So then like what would be, maybe this is like too much down into finance. I just ask these questions because I think finance is kind of like magic, like how people can like move things around. But what would be like the appropriate risk appetite to allow them to, responsibly invest how they currently are, and then responsibly invest into health tech? So because fundamentally, if you invest in health tech, more innovation means people are going to live longer, healthier, happier lives, which is great too. Like, why get to your pension if you're when you get to the pension stage, you're
Yeah.
like you have all these problems that can't be dealt with. So like there is like a balance to be had there, I think.
Yeah, and in the end, it's all about the diversification of your portfolio in all different asset classes. And I think that in any asset class, you should reserve perhaps 1 or 1.5% or 2% to innovation. With 0%, then you don't believe in the future, right? Then you don't believe in progress.
Yeah.
So definitely should not be 10 or 20% because that's insane, but low percentage should be allocated.
Yeah. Is it something like that you can go to these pension funds and say, hey, I have made the NLC, I have like this huge network to build this innovation, this change into the future. Is that something that you guys could go straight there? Because I imagine in America, I could just go like talk to like the person who manages it and then, you know, get them to like vote on it and then get me in to using their funds. But then again,
Yes,
that could just be my ignorance. So then how would you get them to make that change? Is that something you could go directly to them, or is that like legislation that stops them?
No, for legislation, they can do it. I think that the VC industry. So I think that the VC industry has a problem. If you look at the historical returns of the whole market, are not well. They're not really sound. They're not really good. And if you take a deeper dive in the VC market, they live on the management fee, right? So 2% management fee. So they always have a small team, and as a consequence, they only will do 10 assets. They will only do 10 investments. But the volatility with innovation is by definition, by default, is massive. Otherwise, it's not an innovation. You can think you can always predict the winner, but if it's truly innovative, you can't. So you need more than 10 assets, more than 10 innovation. But it's not possible because you only have 2% management fee over 100 million or 200 million. So you have a small team. So that's the problem. And even in Europe, the early stage VCs, they are 10 or 20 million. The volatility is too high for the multi-billion investors. So what we are creating now is a diversified portfolio of 80 to 90 assets where you can follow the winners. And then you get a diversification. And now they are getting interested. Now, the problem we still have is that we are in the pre-seed seed phase. So we are now working on a 100 million funds. Well, now they're starting to build appetites. But they would even prefer 500 million or a billion funds, because then you have the same amount of work for the big pension fund compared to 100 million.
Yeah.
But the limited diversification of a VC firm, that's a massive problem. In particular in Europe. I think in the United States, they're already more advanced, and you are exploring new models, like Andreessen Horowitz is exploring a new model. Tiger is exploring a new model to get a higher degree of diversification.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with when it comes to VC funds doing it more smaller. Even when they are early stage, they do only like maybe 10 to 20 investments, and then the fund goes out in like 5 to 10 years, depending on their horizon. So having like 7 to 80, 80 to 90, it almost sounds like an index fund in terms of like you're so blended that it'll most likely like average out to being positive.
Yeah, but the average is quite good.
Yeah.
And with this, and that's the second assumption, the thesis, investment thesis we have. If you are in really early stage, you cannot always predict the winners, but you have to do your homework. But if you do it at scale, you can improve your homework in essence. So I've got a team of 80 full-time equivalents and a massive network around it. And we can assess the risk better than the market because we have a better team, we've got more data, more information. And combined with that, if you have a better information position, you can attract better partners. And like we're building ventures with top-notch hospitals in Europe, but also in the United States now. And because we work with those corporates, we can make better decisions. So that's the flywheel effect we do in the early stage. So it's just not spray and pray. No, it's making a better assessment and broadening your portfolio at the same time.
Yeah. If that was the second thesis, are there other theses that NLC is working on proving out?
Well, the first one is innovation is needed big time, and it will be now, tomorrow, and the next decade. In particular, I would say in particular in Europe and also in the United States. And let me alone look at in Europe. We have a massive problem with employment. We have too little workers, right? Or too few. Right? So also in the healthcare, we just cannot find the people anymore because we have an aging population and less young people. So there are basically two options: more immigrants, and there will come more immigrants due to climate change, but we need them as well. And the second is increase productivity, and that's always done by innovation. So if you don't innovate, we cannot look after our people. So it all starts with that. You have to look at innovation. And secondly, in innovation is the highest impact and the highest return. The money multiples are insane if you have a success, if you are in there very early, right? And we've got some great examples for that. But if you are in the early stage, that's the third thesis, you have to do it at scale. Subscale 10 ventures, you cannot build up the network, you cannot build up the information position. And another, and that's very conflicting with the worldview of VCs. VCs always say you need the founding team, they need a majority of the company. And I absolutely disagree with that investment thesis. Because in health tech, if you have, so it's most of the time complex stuff. So from inception, from the lab all the way to the market, there's enough literature that you need 4 different CEOs. You need 4 different CEOs. It's just insane if you give the first CEO 50% of the shares. And then you look at the other side of the thesis, what is the biggest failure of startups? Is first of all, there's no product market fit or there's a technical problem or whatever. But the second is team. Because Peter's principle, everybody will grow to a level of incompetence. And that's in particular in health tech. Because if you're good at clinical trial, it doesn't mean you're good at product development. It doesn't mean you're good at scaling exercise. So there's another very important thesis. Lowell, I just had to think about your briefing because you said don't hold back. So here you have it.
Yes.
This is the bankruptcy of VCs in Europe.
Yeah. I'm curious about the equity one in particular, because I'm familiar more with like the tech side of models where it is more, even like the health tech, like BCI type people that I know, over time the founders do get diluted. That's just the nature of the raise, things change. But I'm just thinking, you're right. I have heard that and seen that like there's new CEOs that take over time. Like there's very rarely have the same one that goes all the distance. But it does seem that I wouldn't, maybe I'm like misinterpreting you, but I wouldn't like artificially like reduce the equity in the beginning, because then they can like navigate it until there's a dilution where like there's more party in. Then it's more like a collective people like leveling it up at the different stages. So instead of being like the driving force behind it, they slowly mature to the point where like they're just like on the board finding the people to like bring it up to the next level, versus like maybe the way I took it was where like they were given like I think the average is like in America, let's say like there's like 4 founders, like everyone would get like 20%. And so it sounded like maybe they would get like 10% and they just like a larger pool for employees and other further rounds to come along the way.
Yeah, so I fully get what you say. We apply little bit different model. So we are focused on the tech side. So we look at the quality of the tech. Does this solve a real problem? And is it a real solution? Does it have a good competitive advantage? It's IP, first mover, knowledge, whatever. Is this really good? And it mainly originates from academic research institute and from big corporates, from scientists, from PhDs, professor. And there's, I think, enough evidence as well. There's negative correlation of an inventor becoming a successful entrepreneur. And that's most of the time it's not. So we said we are the founders as a company, and we embed the technology in our ecosystem. So we will support them all for 10 years or whatever is needed. So we are the founders, and we started with 100%. Then we look, okay, what's needed? So first of all, we need to get the inventor on board, but sometimes the inventor wants to stay with the academic center, right? And just want to be an advisor. Another time, he or she starts working for us. And then we allocate a percentage to the staff and a percentage to the CEO. And to the CEO, so it's a co-founder. We say, listen, this is the tech. You have to bring it from A to B. And that's not from the lab to the market. Now you have to run the clinical trials. And if you like it and you're able, competent, then you can continue. But otherwise, we find another CEO. So it's a different model.
Yeah, I see the difference now. Yeah.
And I think it's quite cruel what we do as society. It's because we depend on entrepreneurs for progress. Did you read the book Anti-Fragile? Probably you did.
Yeah, I think it's on my shelf behind me somewhere.
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah.
But this opening is really nice, where you say we should have a statue for entrepreneurs because they are the biggest risk takers, and they start an endeavor with the knowledge that they probably will die somewhere, right? That they will fail, and still they do it. And what I like, okay, so we assume as well that most will fail, opportunity to learn, but they will not succeed in it. But if you work together, instead of letting the CEO doing it all alone, if you do it with a bigger group, a little bit European model, then you can increase the chance of success, or you can reduce the chance of failure by supporting him or her more.
Yeah.
And that's what we're actually seeing with our model. There are less ventures failing, and there are no ventures failing for the wrong reason.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just think it's interesting.
There are good reasons why ventures should fail. I mean, clinical trial was not good. Okay, stop it, clear. Or there's a competitor stronger, stop it, clear. But the most important reason why venture fails is a second important is team. And that's for us, it's never a reason. We just replace him or her, and the tech continues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so I see where the difference is. In the U.S., a lot of places have a model where it's like they're the fund, they have the money, people come to them, they pitch, they get depending on their stage, like 7 to 20% of the equity goes to them for the investment round. It's usually a syndicate of investors. It's usually very rarely one investor doing it, but then they get like a bladed percentage as it relates to their investment of I think Y Combinator does like 7% of equity, but it's something like a safe, I think. But like most people, when it comes to early stage, they'll probably take somewhere like 10 to 20% of the company. I think Apple in the 70s got like 30% taken for their early stage. And so that has the founders owning the 70% and they manage it from there on. It sounds like you guys are like the driving focus. You have like these theses, you have these ideas that you see, you find the partners who know how to innovate and make them happen. And then you bring them in, you kind of give them like everything they need, the staff, everything to set them up. And you say, go. And then you're kind of like the guiding hand that supports them and kind of encourages them forward. Yeah. And so what the left hand learns, the right hand will know as well at the same time. Like that's the benefit of it. Because you have like that central team pushing them on. It sounds like, I'm curious to what extent that American EU factor comes into this, where it's like one of the benefits of having the founders have such a big control is they have the knowledge that if they screw it up, it kills everything. Where in yours, it seems like if there was like let's say a bad CEO, you just come in and you like flick them away like a flea. But like you guys are like a bit of a safety net. I know you won't. I'm just saying like as like a joke, but there's an element of like a safety net in that like there's still parents watching. So I wondered to what extent like that comes into the factor of speed. So like Americans, like they're very fast because they have that like if I'm not fast, like someone else is gonna eat my lunch. But then these guys have like not like the parents are still there, but it does. They have like that little bit of like being minded by someone, which is a little different in terms of like being a CEO, being decisive.
I got 100% what you say, but back to anti-fragile. What Taleb is saying as well, and I'm just quoting him because, as I said before, I like this book. He said the biggest fragilizer of society is lack of skin in the game. And that's what you mentioned. You need skin in the game. If you don't make it, you're dead, or your bank or whatever. So they can earn milestone-based equity. They will get some equity, and they can earn milestone-based equity. So they've got a carrot. But we are not paying them in the beginning. So they better make it. So I think if we really start paying them good salaries from the start, then they wouldn't bother. Then they are corporate employees, right? But no, they are full in the wind. We support them with tender love and care, with connections, with advice, with information, if they want, but they are in the driver's seat. So we have some CEOs, we don't see them, we don't hear them. They are brilliant, they just push it forward. And other CEOs are brilliant as well. They ask anything. They want, can you help me with this? And then we also have some incompetent CEOs, but we are not parroting them, not at all, because they have to succeed. Otherwise, they do not make money and they do not make progress.
Yeah. So, do they have power of the purse? Like, do they manage their finances and stuff?
Yeah.
Or is that like you guys? Okay. Because when you said like go ahead.
No, they are the CEO of the company. They are the statutory director, and they just go. And very quick, we get other investors in as well. And in the beginning, we were always a majority investor, but we dilute fast. What we just have discussed is the reason why, one of the many reasons why corporates cannot innovate. It's impossible because people have not skin in the game. Because if they fail, they still have a job. And actually, some people think if I fail, I've got a cross behind my name and I cannot make a career in this corporate, so I probably just push it forward, right? And there's another thesis why corporates cannot innovate. They should not be able. I'm really worried if corporate is good in innovation. Because if you are responsible for a value chain of 100 million, 500 million, whatever, you should not play around and pivot in the value chain, because it can break down your whole P&L, right? So I am personally convinced that corporate should truly disruptive innovation should always come from outside.
Yeah,
and it should not be a playground for the corporates.
Yeah, I think if I was in the organizations, these big corporations, I would just allocate a percentage of revenue in my P&L for innovation, and I'd basically say you can pick 2 to 5 people that you want. It's kind of like not Brian. What's the billionaire guy who did aerospace in Britain? Virgin Galactic.
I know what you mean.
Branson.
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson. He whenever he would go to build a new company, he'd basically take the top people, like salespeople, the top person in each of those departments, and say, "All right, you guys come with me. You now have this responsibility over here, and the people underneath you are going to boost it up." And so, there was that energy of innovation where he basically just gave people the money and said run, and had all these different ways of doing that. But that's how I'd want to do it, because at a certain point, that's kind of boring, and you really can't keep the best people with that type of mentality.
But he's not a
the best people. Well, I mean, that's still. I mean, it's like one of the largest employers in the world. like the
Yeah, but
aerospace,
he's not
etc.
corporate. No, but I think what's very important that he is a top guy and he's an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. So he dares to say yes and no. But any other corporate in the world, it just means by a professional manager, which I really respect because for me, I would be a very lousy corporate leader. It's a really tough job what they do. But it's not Richard Branson because he's an entrepreneur. And so I'm not sure if I agree with your, I am sure. I think it's a wrong example. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was just more making the point that I think the Richard Branson model is better for corporates. And if not better, but like that's how I would run them if I was in the corporate manager person. I would try to run it more like Richard, where there is that engine of innovation coming from within, because there's a level like what you're saying, like the most people phase out as the company grows. Like the person who really likes the early stage excitement of building something, when it starts getting to like A and B, like in between A and B, they get bored and they want to leave. But then I have like personal friends that say they get like golden handcuffs where like they're getting paid too well, they bought a house, and like they're creep stuff. And so it's like, how do you keep that person engaged and excited for what they're doing? Usually, what the model that I enjoy is I say, okay, when we get to that stage, you pick the team that you want, and you'll have funding, and you can just work on these exciting projects that will relate to the product. So you basically have like a mini company within that company, even to the point of like disrupting the main sources of revenue potentially. And I think that's how you keep like little bunting offs of like trying new things. I think Google does that a lot, and it's a model that I think is very powerful. But like once again, I see your point that most corporations don't do that. But I think I'm like kind of pushing back on the sense that I think there's a lot of benefit to doing it alternatively. Like it doesn't always have to be externally coming in. Is what I'm saying.
Let's have a look at your closer look at your friend who has golden. How do you call it? Golden
Handcuffs.
Handcuffs. I would say, okay, if he's talented, you want to become an entrepreneur within this corporate, cool. We reduce your salary by 80%. And we want you to invest X amount of starting capital. You need to have skin in the game, because if you don't have skin in the game, it's playing. And I've seen it with other corporates around me. And before I started NLC 8 years ago, I was a strategy consultant. I saw it with a lot of corporate well-paid managers, and suddenly they start to wear sneakers and being the cool guys because they are innovation of the bank or whatever, but they have not skin in the game. So they will, first thing they will do, they will hire a secretary because they're used to a secretary, and they will have a corner office. Oh no, we will not take a corner office because I will sit there. It's not on a shoestring. It's not on really finding the solution for the problem, not really pivoting. It's just playing. So I'm, as you feel and sense, you can see, I've got a very, very strong opinion. Mm-hmm. I respect corporate leaders. They work hard. They're extremely smart and passionate. But running a corporate is a different ballgame than running a startup. And those two, they are like asking a baseball player to play snooker. He might be good at snooker because he has feeling with the ball, but he will not play with the game. And really, innovation cannot. And I still think that Apple and Google, they still buy. And the question is if they are really good at innovation, because they're spending so much money. If they would have invested all their money in VCs with a really big portfolio, if the output would not be bigger. I know the answer.
Yeah.
Sorry for this bulldozing, but I've got a very strong opinion about it. Yeah.
No, it's a good. You're not bothering me at all. I enjoy disagreeing with people. My wife says I'm overly aggressive sometimes when it comes to conversations. Where I don't mind. Like I know sometimes people are. I once had an argument with someone, but that was much more heated than this. And the next day, the person comes up to me, like the person who was watching it. The coach was like, "So, are you okay, Lowell?" And I was like, "About what?" And I'm just starting my day. I was like, what's going on? It's like, well, yesterday you had like this big, confrontation with someone. And I was like, we were just we were just discussing something that we cared about. Like, I don't understand why you think like I would be mad. So yeah, you're not bothering me. Like, I agree, disagree. I see the point you're making. I don't entirely agree. I think there's like, but I also see that like that's the model that it kind of works. Like, do people do? I couldn't find an example where someone entirely goes in house. Like you're saying, Google doesn't go entirely in house. I was just wondering, like, to what percentage are the innovations they come out with products from in-house versus outhouse or external? It probably, just for the nature of like how much money they have versus how many people in house, is they probably bringing more from the out to in versus like in going out in terms of like making products. And so it sounds like the best models would be some type of hybrid. I was just saying, like, in terms of like how I'd run the organizations, I always think this way, where it's like, if I was in charge, how would I think about it? And I would try to find a way to make innovation happen. But I also see that, like, as someone who's a VC, you're thinking like, if there was more money put into VCs like me, I can invest in like 80, 90 more, X per VC fund, and there'd be even more innovation. And so that's kind of where you're coming from it.
And I think it's happening. If you look at the statistics, the overall R&D expenditures of health corporates is declining, and M&A budget are increasing. So they are shifting away from R&D towards M&A. Having said that, if you don't innovate at all internally, you should, also for the culture, people should build up grit and resilience, and also with innovation, and see how difficult it is. And so it should not go to zero, but I think overall the percentage should be more towards 90-80% external and 10-20% internal. And that's actually happening. It's happening. So it's not that I'm making my point that the corporates see it wrong, because most corporates do it like this already.
Yeah. All right, so you mentioned earlier that there's been some really big impacts from your investment strategy, and I'm not talking like returns. I think that's, even though that is probably easier, and like that's what people like write headlines about, like, innovation that results in like 3 million X or whatever. I'm more like focused on like how it affects people, and so I'm wondering what has been some of the more significant impacts like on people's health in terms of like something being built innovation wise and how it's helping people. I'm sure like the return on that in terms of investment is good too. But I always, like, for me, it's just like I get bored of those headlines. I like to hear how it affects people. And so with this model, like 80-90, I'm imagining there's some really cool stuff that you've been able to do, like support.
Yeah. Well, what is closest to my heart is Concord Neonatal. It's a venture from the NICU. So there was a professor who was and actually a medical specialist, and they worked on premature babies. And they said, what is the problem with all the premature babies? And it's getting really close to me, because my youngest kid is a premature, born 2 months too early. She's very healthy now, but we were in distress for a couple of months. It's extremely healthy and happy now. So it's I want to say that as well. What happens with all premature babies is that the lungs are not developed. And that's causing all different kind of problems. So too little oxygen to the brain, to the rest of the bodies, it can lead to severe complication and even ultimately death. But also the complication during the first month, like my kid, but it can be a couple of years or it can be lifelong. So this doctor has the idea, let's keep the cord longer connected to the mother, so the oxygen can flow through the mother to the baby, even if the baby's on the board, and just on the lap of the mother. So he goes to the technical department of the academic hospital, and those people really like the idea, and they start manufacturing such a table where they can catch the baby above the mother and keep the cord intact. So it's a prototype, and he's testing it, and it seems to work very well. So he goes to a big corporate. He said, I developed this, can you help me? And the corporate says, wow, this is fantastic. Our patient needed it. It is beautiful. Our hospital needed it, beautiful. But can you come back if you have the first turnover? Yeah. Because we are, in essence, we are a marketing and sales organization. All the corporates are marketing, sales, and manufacturing. So please come back. I said, yeah, but I'm a doctor, I'm a professor, I'm not a businessman. Well, perhaps you have to go to venture capital. So they go to venture capital. And venture capital, they tell them the same story. This is fantastic. This is really great. Such a smart, clever innovation and seems to work. It's beautiful. But what is the business plan? And who's going to be the CEO? So this guy said, yeah, it's not me because I like to help patients and I'm not a businessman. Yeah, well, we cannot help you. We need a plan and we need to invest a minimum of 2 million and then come back. That's how the world works, right? So somebody said you have to talk to NLC. We talked with him. He explained what he was making. Personally, I did not believe in it. I thought the solution was too simple. But we don't have a consensus model, right? And we don't have a top-down model. And we had one of our venture partners, he said there's some magic in this. I believe in it. So we did some survey, we interviewed some people, and we started the company. Long story short, it's now in 8 different countries sold. It's almost now at 100 hospitals. And then you talk about impact. But if my baby would be born today, my baby girl, she would not be an incubator. And those corporates did not help them with reason, so I don't blame them. The VC could not help them because the VC was only with a small team. And we started it. And that's, so we can talk about, and with currently we have 84 ventures as of today. Yesterday with 83, with 84 ventures. They all have the same story. Some affected hundreds of thousands of people, but it makes it really close. If you could just help a bunch of newborn babies and give them a better start, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I can see more of how your model works. If you're a great inventor and you want to see change in the world, or if you're like really good at executing at different stages of a company's life cycle, I could see how your model, your VC fund would be a lot of fun. And that, like, let's say you're not like an early stage person, you're like a middle stage, that you can take a product, develop it further, get it to the end line. I can see, like, through your example just now, I could see, like, if someone is an inventor and they have ideas and they want to help, like, get the invention to like the MVP stage, but then that's really where like their heart is, versus like converting that person, like trying to change them so they can be a leader and keep going. They can just, let someone else take the reins on that, and then maybe they go and invent something else. So like I see the power of that model now that I've thought about it further and heard like a direct example. Because earlier I was like, I don't know, it's kind of odd, but like it has to be working for some extent, so I'm gonna like keep listening. And now I can see it's like if you know yourself and you know what you're really, really good at, and you can fit into your ecosystem, I think. And I say fun, I think it's like you have an exciting time. Where like sometimes people work and it's like every day they don't necessarily know if they're contributing. Where like if with your model they would always be contributing because they're like at the maximal for their output in terms of like building something that actually affects people's lives. So like that example is really good for like helping me understand like the power of your model as well, which is kind of a nice bonus.
Nice. And let's continue on this example. And there's also the anti-scale fallacy of Hodowich. I like that as well. So on average, you need 4 different CEOs for a tech, but that's not always given. So what happened? We assessed this technology. Once again, in the beginning, I did not believe in it, and through the years, and I'm now the biggest supporter of it. I love it, and that's innovation, right? You don't see it, and then it's happening, and then you can't believe it. For a fun fact, in 2 weeks' time, I will be one day at the NICU, just seeing how it works in practice, etc. Okay, so we've got this starting point. Then we look in the market. What is a CEO who can help this specific technology to the next level? So we've got 4 in-house headhunters, and we've got a network of recruiters. We came across, I can now say, a brilliant CEO. And she had a lot of experience internationally in Germany and in Asia and in the rest of Europe in the NICU care. So she knows the market really good, and she was a product developer. And what we needed was a product development. We did not need a CEO who built a massive team or attract massive capital or whatever. No, we need someone brought that technology, which was in the premature phase, actually, to the next level. So we said, listen, we've got this opportunity. We think it has great impact, but you know better. Do your due diligence. Talk to anybody. Ask our any question. But we think you're a great candidate. However, we also think that you're good in the first phase, and we think we need to shift gears with someone else if it will scale. So she started skin in the game, investing money, in the beginning no salary, because she believed in the impact. She believed in the inventor, and she had an intrinsic drive to create progress, to move it forward. So a couple of years later, we were starting to scale. And then came, of course, this question, do we need another? But she developed herself, and that's what I like of the anti-scale fallacy of outreach. She developed herself, and she also knew that she needed another person besides her, which we thought in the beginning we need a new CEO to scale. And now we organized it in the board and with a commercial person beside. So it's I really like this example.
Mm-hmm.
That someone can develop all the life cycle with the tech, with great impact.
Yeah. How do you know if the CEO is running it and they're running straight? And there's like, for normal startups, there's this. I've talked to investors, I've talked to startup founders, I've been a founder. Like, I just tell people how it is. So like I'm just boring. I'm just myself wherever I go, which is kind of a nice feature for people. But like, there are times where people don't tell the investors exactly what's going on. They like say, "Oh, it's great," or whatever. They don't tell them like the struggles. So then, how do you ensure that you're being kept abreast? And like, maybe it's like a quarterly thing. You guys all come together, like, "Hey, how's it going? Do you need anything?" type of thing. And there's like a direct tie in that way. The real, like, which is my underlining thought. But then, how do you know? Essentially, is the question, when you're reaching these different phases, where like one CEO maybe has to step out, or needs continual education throughout the process to be ready for it. If the CEO is completely running it, and there's this inherent problem where some CEOs don't tell their investors how it's going until it's like 2 minutes before a raise, and they're like, "Hey, give us more money." It's like, it's been like 2 years. You haven't said anything to us. Why would I give you money? Like, you have to, it's like, come pitch us anew again. Versus like, a lot of people, if you just like maintain the relationship, it'll go easier for you. Just, there's a piece of advice out there: maintain the relationship. Don't just treat it like once, like a piggy bank, like for one every 2 years or something like that. But so how do you identify those phases and encourage the transparency you need to have to help the company and the IP and your VC fund be successful?
Yeah. So first of all, you never know. So it was not your last question, but just before your last question, you asked, how do you know sure? You never know sure, right?
Yeah.
There's always a level of trust and mutual expectation. But we have a quarterly reports. We have every quarter we discuss all portfolios with the whole team, with all the venture partners. And there are a lot of interaction with our total 80 FTE, like legal is supporting as well, and finance team is helping as well. And so there are different layers, and we get somewhere a weak signal. We will discuss it every quarter. Having said that, sometimes we are in the dark as well, and we don't get control. It happens everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
But it's about the governance and checks and balances. And that's the advantage of, so there are a lot of VC of 2 or 3 or 4 people. That's the advantage of having a team of 80, and we're now growing to hopefully 200 people, that you can set up mechanisms, structure, IT and processes to get a better grip of it, without giving away the independency of the ventures, because they have to find their way and they have to pivot because they are in the market, they know what's going on, and not we.
Yeah. And then it's interesting sometimes when I think I've done so many interviews. There's a part of my head that thinks like in a meta way, are there themes in this episode? And it's interesting that we talked about like the difference between the U.S. and the EU. Great, all these different things, and we're talking about these different stages of companies and how people manage that and so like there's a little bit of me that's wondering, what as someone like yourself who's investing across the gamut in America and in the EU, like how are these just like going differently? Like are the things that you learn from US companies because everything's in-house that you can then translate to EU companies? It feels like this kind of like you get the best of both worlds. You get to see there's this great story of I think it's paragliding where paragliders love new people getting into this. I don't know if you know anything about paragliding, but for people who don't know, so paragliders love new people getting into the field because when you're paragliding together, they'll let the new people go up ahead and they'll watch how they respond to the air eddies and stuff. And they're like, okay, I know there's a thing over there. I know there's a thing over there. So they let them all kind of like be sacrificial lambs a little bit, and they can like navigate through. And so I'm wondering to what extent like you're able to, not like the Americans are the sacrificial lambs, but like if like Americans are like a little bit more like if you're able to like use the differences between the two continents, even though Europe is not actually a continent, to the benefit of like everyone, like what Americans do really great, you can like translate that to Europeans. If what the Europeans do really great, you can translate to the Americans. Like because everything's integrated into the nucleus that is NLC, you can get all that learning, I suppose, like that. It sounds like there's a really big opportunity for development, just like in terms of like people like learning and from the different cultures there.
Yeah. To be honest, so I've got some American colleagues. Our chairman is in executive board of Medtronic, but he's Dutch, Rob ten Hoed. So he's guiding me in that as well, learn more about Americans. But I don't know that much about the differences. So I've got a couple of Americans working in the team. I've got a couple of people who worked and lived long time in the States, but I'm not an expert myself.
Yeah.
What I learned, so we have 80 people. We've got 24 nationalities. That's quite big, a high number on ADFT. That I learned already a lot from the different cultures within NLC, being an American. But we also have people from the Middle East. We've got people from Asia, across Europe, South America, Africa. There's a lot to learn from a lot of people.
Yeah. I was just,
But what I really envy about Americans is their, it's not so much the grit, but it's the think big or go home. So when I tell the story about NLC in Europe, they say, "Oh man, you grew fast," and the American will say, "Oh, you did a great job. What do you need to go faster?" I love that question. Instead of, you did it great. No, how can you go faster? And why are you not 10 times as big? And let's go.
Yeah. I think the problem.
I love it.
Yeah, but the problem there is like there's a little bit of like a lack of celebration for the stages. Like when you succeed somewhere, it's like, all right, well now what are you gonna do? Like even I'm guilty of that too. Where if someone's successful, it's like, okay, what's the next thing they're gonna work on? Like I'm a little mean in that. Yeah, I would just be like there's it's sometimes it's hard. Like I can like list a number of examples even historically where like people they'll reach a mile marker and they won't know, like they'll know they reached it but they won't feel anything and they'll be looking to do the next thing, like working on. They'll just keep going. They won't like relax. Yeah, it's weird.
I'm a little bit surprised because what I like and what's different than in particular with North and Western Europe, what I have the feeling when I talk to Americans, they always say, "Oh, that's great, that's fantastic, you did a great job," right? To give a compliment. Wow, cool, let's go.
Yes, and, they do this.
And then the next question is, let's continue. How can we build it faster and bigger?
Yeah.
Well, I think a European will say, "Well, that's amazing. How did you do it? Oh, cool, nice, yeah." And then it stops, right? It's just an anecdote about something else. It's not business; it's sports. So my brother emigrated to Denmark as a cattle farmer, And my niece, his daughter, is very good in running. She's now preparing to go to the Olympics, so she's really good. She's Danish national record holder of the 5K. Here, proud. But she's good. So where did she study? In the United States, because the United States said we need talents, and all the talent. If you put a lot of talents together, it will make our athletes better as well. So she studied, she did a bachelor's and 2 masters in the States, is all paid for. That's fantastic. And I asked her the same question as you just asked me, and she has more experience. And her comparison between Denmark in this case, but I think Denmark and the Netherlands don't differ that much, is exactly the same as I said. So, are you training for the Olympics? Wow, that's great, fantastic. Do you need help? And superb. And well, in Denmark, they will say, that's difficult. Are you sure? You know, it's there's more a strive for perfection. Not perfection, but progress.
Yeah. I think they both can be true in what I'm saying. I think people like one response that people can give in America is like, great, you're doing great, you know, keep it up. What can we do to help with that? I think they're like internally for the people who are having that said to them, there's sometimes this like lack of appreciation of great. Like if you were say, oh, you're doing a great job, it's like, oh, okay, really? Well, I'm trying to do this. Like, you want to help, or you want to like, do you need help? Like they don't like. There's that like reaching those thresholds of like, oh, I just did $1 million a month, great. Well, let's try to do 5. You know, like they just keep. But there's a little bit of that like, like, hey, they don't even like internally think, hey, I did a good job. This is cool. Like there's like that too. It's like, so it's not that. So
good is not good enough.
Yeah, like there's like that, like you're like the Twinkie on the end of a stick, like you're never gonna reach it, type of thing. Just keep going.
Got it.
Yeah. But
in your flip side,
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a flip side of like, there's some weirdness there. I don't know if it's like collective mental illness or not, but when I looked at your companies, and I wasn't able to look at all of 80, but when I don't think I found this type. I didn't see anything like involving like pharmacy or pharmacy technology when it came to health tech that you have invested in. If I'm wrong, you know, just tell me like, hey, company X does pharmacy stuff. I was just wondering if there's any reason why pharmacies have like so far not been on your radar as something to innovate in.
You are right, but I'm not sure if you look today, because today we did build the first biotech venture. It's happened today in Alzheimer, very experimental Alzheimer corner. But to answer your question, I started NLC with very limited resources, no team, no money. So we started with a low-tech solution and a digital solution, because little capital was needed and you can make faster progress, I thought.
Yeah.
Then we build up a portfolio, we build up the team, we're building up traction, and then more and more academics ask us, can you help with this biotech or pharma as well? We waited with it, we postponed it, and last year we said, okay, there is something. So we set up a team. There are now 8 people. And we expect this year to build 6 new ventures in that space.
Yeah,
and I think it's wise this discussion. It's a difficult market. You need more know-how. You need a bigger network than some medtech. Don't get me wrong, because some medtech is very it's deep tech as well. Just different markets.
Yeah. Just a note of clarification. I think I meant like pharmacies, like the people who give you drugs, not pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So
I'm
like
talking about pharmaceuticals. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that pharmaceuticals.
Thank you for this language.
I thought I was like, I think that we're having a language barrier.
Very good.
Yeah. No worries. So then, do you have interest in? Because I think pharmacies themselves, like the distribution of medication to certain places, especially specialty pharmacies, that's something I've been looking into a lot.
You really want to talk about pharmacies?
Yeah, like the pharmacy themselves, like
Oh,
how
cool.
yeah. Like, I was just wondering, like I didn't see anything like that there, and it felt like some low hanging fruit because a lot of them are terrible. So I just was wondering, if there's any reason why. Am I right? Like there aren't any pharmacies in terms of getting people the drugs, there, and then B, if there are none, why is that? Like, is there like a missed opportunity there? Is it like there's like logic for it's not in your thesis or stuff? Like I'm just curious.
I just wonder what happens here because today we built the first biotech venture. Um, we have some built before, but with our new model, we built the first today. We just announced it. And just before I entered this call, I received a newsletter of the green health to make the healthcare system more sustainable. As you can imagine, it's a massive proportion of our society is healthcare, in particular of GDP, but also a number of workers. And it's also a big polluter. And we now announced today that we start a challenge in the pharmacies and the distribution with pharma because there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of unused medicine, which is damaging the world as well. Then answer your question. We first focus on IP-driven solutions because it can be protected. It's relatively easy to attract the capital. But we are building up the competence to set up new businesses in the early stage in the healthcare industry. So we're having this ecosystem. We're now with 80 people. We've got a massive international network. So we get more and more requests. Can you do something with green health, for instance? And green health. Can you do something with service providers in healthcare? And we are looking into those industries. Do we have a strategic edge and can we really add something with our competence? And that's the answer to your question. So we might enter that field in a couple of months or years. I don't know, but that's the reason why we're not there yet.
Yeah, the pharmacies in America are just really obnoxious. Why?
Why is
I have
that?
to like, well, there's like benefit managers that control a lot of stuff. It's also just like I don't know why they choose to do things the way they do them. For instance, I have to like call every month for like especially medication I have to take or I die, and like I think it's weird that I have to call anyone to order it when I'm just saying, hey, I want the medication, ship it to me. Like that should just be like an online thing or like an app that can send it to me. But then the amount of times a year that they'll screw it up and potentially I don't have medication on hand because of that, it's like pretty bad. Like it's not the insurance, which you'd think insurance is the problem with most things. It's not the doctor's office. It's literally just the pharmacy, like misplacing the paperwork or not doing their thing right. And so I've been looking into it more and more. What's the logic for their screw ups? Because when I'm talking to their managers and directors, and I'm just like, hey, why does this keep happening? The answers aren't very satisfying. So I've just been wondering, who's working on these things, so that I can learn more. But yeah, I was just wondering. I understand you can only do so much with your time, so it is like a pick and choose. Like you have to like focus on what you already know with your team. They can do really great things at. So I understand like you don't have the team necessarily to go in these different areas yet.
But now you're touching on another subject and perhaps an answer to your question. So I envy the Americans for a lot of stuff. The culture, and I mentioned already a couple of things, but I don't envy the Americans at all for the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And it makes me actually a little bit sad to think you guys are spending 20% of your GDP on a system which is rotten it's terrible. I just heard a statistic that that 3/4 of the personal bankruptcies come from after a person has been diagnosed with cancer.
Yep.
I mean, think about it. The most advanced society in the world, spending 20% of the GDP, 50% of the global healthcare market is in America. It's insane. And now you're telling me the pharmacy industry is not, sorry, the pharmacies. So, yeah, if you're underprivileged or if you're diagnosed with cancer, you are screwed up. And I really don't understand why that situation has to be. We are spending 11% of healthcare. It's for everybody. No one is excluded. Nobody in this country will go bankrupt. Nobody, not a single person will go bankrupt based on illness, cancer.
Yeah.
And it's not because we have better doctors. No, it's not.
Yeah. Well, we all know American doctors are the best. But just joking. But the people that's the really sad, like something that's really, really sad is like the idea that you can do everything right in your life and you get cancer, get some type of illness, and your whole life savings is wiped out. Everything that you'll have to like give up your house, you have to give up everything. And it's really unfair and it's really inappropriate. And then on top of that, you have pharmacies. So like specialty there's like pharmacies for like, I don't know, like really strong ibuprofen, like over like that you like go to the store or whatever for. But there's like specialty pharmacies that handle like the cancer drugs themselves. Yeah. And they're like most people describe it as having like a part-time job, just making sure they can get their drugs on time, because the specialty pharmacies can be quite shitty. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's terrible. So I just, anyone listening in who knows anything, let me know, because whenever I see the same problem like 3 times, like something starts itching in the back of my head. And so like I've just been seeing a lot of people talk about, I'm on like all the forums, and people are talking about like, oh, the pharmacy like losing their information or whatever, and then like the doctor has to resubmit it to insurance, so the insurance has to send it all the way over there. Like one day this last month, and then we'll like move on because I don't know to the extent people want to hear my thoughts on things. But I took like a full day off just to like be on conference calls with the insurance, my doctor's office, and the pharmacy, like for like 8 hours straight, like talking to different ones, resulting in like a collective conferencing call just to get the pharmacy to admit it was their fault so they could fix it. And if I didn't do that, yeah, I would not have gotten anything resolved for like 3 to 6 like months potentially. But then that happens to everyone. But then no one's just like tenacious as me. Like I'm kind of like.
So where's the money going? If you spend double the amount of money compared to a healthcare system which is better organized than America, where's the money going?
Probably, I think like Band-Aids, for instance, if I buy Band-Aids off the counter, it's probably like $5. They just, when you're getting it from the hospital, it's like $800 when you're like billed for it. I think they're just like upticking it in that way. Because I think it started in like I read a book on this, but I think it started in the 30s when we were fighting your guys' war, World War II. I'm just joking. But
Well, thank you.
Yes, we came for you guys, for Holland in particular. But
we know, we remember.
Yeah, I was on a forum, and apparently, yeah, you guys like really appreciate that. But they locked pay, so then they didn't have. Like they can say like, hey, I'll pay you like $5 more, come work for me. So they found benefits. They like, oh, I'll work out a deal with your doctor so that you can have like whatever, and that was insurance. And they originally got that idea from like Germany with Bismarck and stuff. But when the war ended, they didn't want to give up the insurance like in that way, that relationship to workers. And then people tried coming in here and then making more of a national healthcare thing. But that healthcare back then was like a nickel, so they didn't think it was important. And then the doctors didn't want to like I think it was the doctors stopped it. And then when people started, like when the insurance industry started raising the prices, then the doctor said, well, I'm going to raise my price. And then the hospitals were like, well, if you guys are going to do it, then I'm going to do it. Then it's just like everyone just kind of like running up the circle to like raise the prices. So like it's not like value-based prices for things, I think.
But then
they don't need to.
But then there's a political decision to be made. And why don't they make a decision? We stop it here because they have to look after the people. And say it's obviously it's nonsense what's happening here. We should be ashamed. And now we stop it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
but then back to politics again. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Anyone who has options on that, let us know. And pharmacies sounds like maybe you guys will go into it. We'll just segue off of that. But when it comes to leadership, I'm very curious, like how people can run a team and instill the leadership principles that they actually want in people, right? Like you want people to kind of like break their ideas in their head, like what could be, what should be, and then just kind of like push ahead and do like just try things out. But there are things you have to do as a leader to encourage that or to allow that to happen, because there's leaders who I know I literally talked to a guy yesterday who says all the things that we talk about, but I asked him like two extra follow-up questions. I know he like treats his staff like crap, and like they actually probably want to leave him very quickly. So then I'm curious, like how do you embolden and encourage and get the best from your team when you're working? I mean, like especially when the if you do a bad job, like the costs are really quite large because then people aren't being helped. So then how do you what do you do as a leader to get people to act how you want, like with that boldness that you want to see in them, with that trust, that honesty, that desire to really move the needle as fast as possible?
Yeah.
Like how do you think about that?
Well, first of all, it's the most difficult thing to realize, of course, and particularly if you're growing. If you're growing like we did in 2 years from 30 to 80 people, how do you maintain that culture? And thanks for the advice of having some tea or water. I need it. So my philosophy is first you start with the end goal. What do we try to achieve here? And we try to achieve to bring science to life, science, technology to the patient to improve the healthcare system. That's the impact. And we are all on the impact mission. And we do it for profit. And we are not not for profit because we believe the best way to do this is make use of the capitalist system. Right? Are we on the same page? And we're not playing game A, B, or C. We are playing this game. Then we, what is needed for that? And we define the cultural constraint together, and we define it together. And that's what we call to do. We do it together. You always have to be very open. You have to be decisive, and you have to be optimistic. And that's where we give each other feedback as well. So this, if you're not sharing information, it's a sin in our company. It's really a sin. Because if you, no, let's do it one by one. We have to do it together. None of us is as good as all of us. You have to be open. You have to share information. It's none of us will keep us in its head to keep information behind. Because in innovation you cannot do, because you have to pivot, you have to change, you have to do it fast. Then say farewell of people who don't fit in that culture. That's fine, yeah, because not everybody can live with the impact drive and we need to do. And then create a very safe space. And I think we manage it reasonably well. Mm-hmm. And there's one other thing, just to add to that. Although I love to read the biographies of successful American entrepreneurs, I don't believe in heroship. So I'm not better. Actually, I once read a book, probably by an American, who said you are a successful entrepreneur if you realize at the Christmas dinner that you are the dumbest person in the room. Mm-hmm. And I succeeded in it, I think. I've got extremely talented people, so I delegate it. I give them ownership, and they will take it because they feel safe. Yeah. That's just one of the just a couple of touch points how I try to lead and see.
Yeah,
leading from behind instead of saying we're going to do this or this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the phraseology I've heard is that we call it like the Washington effect, because Washington was like the dumb guy in the group, because he had like Hamilton, Jefferson, all these people around them who were much smarter. It's like it's like there are a lot of people who are just very insecure about smart people being around them, like having anyone around that's smarter than them. It's really weird because like why would I want someone around who couldn't teach me something, who wouldn't know more than me, right? Yeah. Like then I'm like then it's my job to teach them something. It's like I'd rather they be better than me so I can like go off and do something else. It's nicer that way.
let's go back to the European culture, to the Dutch culture. Do you know Johan Cruyff?
No.
It's the Wayne Gretzky of soccer. So it's the Messi of the 1970s. So he was at Pele and Cruyff were the two biggest players in the world, and he's Dutch. And he always had that. He always had fantastic quotes, and that's why I mentioned Wayne's, because he's fantastic quotes as well. And he said, if you are so we in the Netherlands, I just have to explain, we have the rating from 0 to 10 on school. 10 is brilliant, and 0, you don't get 1 is you're a failure, right? And 5 is not good, and 6 is just good enough. So Johan Cruyff, the big soccer legend, he said a 7. If you have a person you have 7, he will always collect 6 around him, so he can be the boss. But the 8 wants to collect a 9 or a 10 around him, so he can become better. And I really like that quote. So I'm not a 10, I'm not a 9, I'm a 7.5 or an 8, and I love to be inspired by smarter colleagues.
How do you so when I'm hiring people, sometimes it's difficult to ascertain like how many things they believe versus they don't believe, like, because there are certain things that like everybody knows to say because like it's the nice things to say. So when you are looking for people who are like 8s essentially, when you're looking for CEO or whatever, are there ways that you assess them to determine they're actually 8s versus like maybe a 6 or a 4 hiding, pretending to be an 8 so they can have the opportunity?
To be honest, I'm not the best person in it. If I have a senior hire, I will have my interview. My most important part of the interview is at a coffee machine, chit chat, before and after the real interview, so to say. I've got great headhunters working for us, and they are trained in it, and they've got all the instruments and the tools. Also the tools, so we do online assessment, etc., and they know the questions. But I think this is a great example. I've got much better people working for me than I can do it myself.
And then what goals do you have for the next like 5-10 years for the organization? Are there things you're driving for right now?
So our investment thesis is you have to do the pre-seed at scale. For the reason I gave you, better information position, so hence you can make better decisions and better partners. And so we want to grow into a global platform and make better risk assessments and increase the chances of success. So we are now active in 12 countries in Europe. Our fastest growing geography is the United States. So we entered it, and there's a massive growth opportunity. So we will open an office later this year in the States, and we are now exploring routes into the global South. And the reason for that is that the impact there is massive.
What's the global South? Sorry, just a quick interruption. What's the global South?
So the global South is so the first part is the Middle East, and then go down Africa, and Africa is underserved. Fastest growing population in the world is massive. So business-wise, as I said, 50% of the global health market is the United States. It will be very low percentage in Africa, but the impact you can realize is massive. And then of course go to Asia.
Yeah, I think I read in one of your interviews that you're trying to get into China too, but that there are like political concerns with ownership with China in terms of IP, but there's still like a good market to go into. But so I think I read that you're exploring China essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a couple of times, and then I got a little bit stuck due to COVID, and they were very constrained, right?
Yeah.
And then we focus more on other geographies. But China is very interesting. It is the healthcare market is it obviously has a huge population. It has a huge problem with aging. They've got a fantastic entrepreneurial drive as well. And still 40% of global patents come from Europe. So, yeah, China now is not a top priority. But we don't scare away to do business in China.
Mm-hmm. All right, then I have some like rapid fire questions I'd love to get your thoughts are on. And so the idea is like just they're like A or B essentially for the most part. But if you don't have an answer, you can just hit pass because that's like more fun than you responding to an uninteresting question. But all right, so coffee or tea?
Tea.
Okay. Milk or sugar?
Milk.
Okay. What book is on your bedside table right now?
Which book is a good question. I just started it the other night. It's by the former CMO of Nike.
Shoe Dog? Shoe Dogs?
No, I love Shoe Dogs. I love that. No, it's not the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer. Emotion marketing, I think. Emotion marketing. Yeah. CMO of Nike. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you were to use one word to describe your leadership style, what would it be?
My relation style, one word. Open.
Yeah, that sounds right from what I've heard so far. And then if someone's visiting the Netherlands, what is a city you recommend people check out?
Amsterdam.
Okay, yeah, that's easy. And then those are the end of my rapid questions. So I just want to thank you, BA, for taking the time to be on the show today. Everyone listen in. Put in the comment section what you learned, and if you have any suggestions for either of us. But BA, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Cool. From my side, no question. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed talking to you.